They say you never see the hero coming. In a lobby full of millionaires, no one noticed the janitor with calloused hands and a child's bracelet on his wrist. But when four armed men closed in on the CEO, who once called him furniture, Noah Hale became the only thing standing between wealth and violence, armed with nothing but a mop and 47 seconds of brutal precision. Stay until the end to see how this janitor brought an empire to its knees. Comment your city below so I know how far this story travels. The marble floor of Aurora Tower's grand lobby reflected 1,000 lights like a frozen constellation, each gleaming tile worth more than Noah Hale's monthly salary. He knew because he'd overheard the architect bragging about it during last month's investor gala. Italian Calacatta marble, $73 per square foot, shipped across an ocean to impress people who wouldn't remember it by morning. Noah remembered everything. It was 7:47 p.m. on a Friday night, and the lobby buzzed with the particular energy of people who believed they were important. Designer suits, practiced laughter, the sharp click of heels that cost more than his daughter's winter coat. Noah pushed his industrial mop across the northeast corner, working in slow, methodical strokes that made him invisible, just another piece of the building's machinery as essential and unnoticed as the air conditioning. "Excuse me." A woman in a crimson dress stepped around him without looking down. Her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I'm here. No, I don't see her yet. The product launch better be worth leaving the Hamptons early." Noah shifted his mop bucket 6 inches left, giving her room. She never noticed. They never did. From his position near the south wall, he had a perfect view of the entire lobby. 18 years of training didn't just disappear because you traded a badge for a mop. His eyes swept the crowd in practiced patterns, exits, choke points, blind spots, irregularities. Most of what he saw was predictable corporate executives preening for each other. Junior employees trying too hard. Security guards checking their phones when they should be checking the room. Then he saw them. 4 men. Different suits, different builds, but moving with identical rhythm, too synchronized for strangers, too alert for guests. Noah's hand tightened on the mop handle. The nearest one, tall, with a slight limp, favoring his right leg, scanned the room like he was memorizing it. His colleague, shorter but broader, kept one hand near his hip where a jacket hung too heavy on one side. Noah touched the blue braided bracelet on his left wrist, worn soft from 2 years of constant wear, the letters Lily had painted in glitter nail polish, now faded but still visible. "Breathe, Daddy." He took a slow breath and kept mopping. "Clear the center aisle, please." A harried event coordinator rushed past her headset blinking. "Ms. Vale arrives in 3 minutes, and this floor better be spotless. Where's OU?" She barely glanced at Noah. "Make sure there are no water streaks." Last time she complained about seeing her reflection looking distorted. As if that's possible with her face. Noah said nothing. In 6 months of working nights at Aurora Tower, he'd learned that silence was its own kind of invisibility. The 4 men had separated, now taking positions at each cardinal point of the lobby. Noah calculated distances, angles, response times. The one near the east entrance kept adjusting his vendor badge. It sat crooked, probably because it wasn't his. The vendor system required biometric scans and 3 levels of approval. These men had good forgeries, but Noah had spent the last 4 weeks documenting Aurora's security failures. He knew exactly how easy it was to bypass their systems. He also knew why someone might want to. The elevator chimed the private executive car that only 2 people in the building could access. The crowd's energy shifted conversations, cutting off mid-sentence as every head turned. Vivian Vale stepped into the lobby like she owned the air itself. At 29, she was the youngest CEO in Aurora Corporation's 70-year history, a fact mentioned in every profile written about her. Tonight, she wore white, a calculated choice Noah had learned. White for purity of vision, for cutting through the noise, for standing above the mess of ordinary business. Her dark hair was pulled back severe enough to hurt diamonds at her throat, catching light like tiny stars orbiting her gravity. Vivian. A board member rushed forward. The presentation is perfect. The investors are very excited about. They should be. Vivian's voice cut through the lobby's ambient noise like a scalpel. We're about to triple our market share. Where's Marcus? I need the final numbers before I go on. Noah pushed his mop toward the center of the lobby, tracking the four men in his peripheral vision. The one with the heavy jacket had moved closer. The one with the bad vendor badge was whispering into his collar, definitely communication gear. Ms. Vale. A young assistant appeared at her elbow, tablet extended. Your speech notes, and Marcus called to say, I don't read notes, Jennifer, you know that. Vivian took the tablet anyway, scrolling with one perfectly manicured finger. And tell Marcus if he's not here in 30 seconds, he's fired. I don't pay him 6 figures to miss. She stopped mid-sentence, her heel catching on something invisible. Noah watched her stumble, watched her face flash through surprise and fury before landing on icy control. She looked down, at a tiny wet spot on the marble floor, at Noah's mop 2 feet away. Are you serious? Vivian's voice could have flash-frozen water. There's a product launch in 10 minutes, and you're creating puddles in the center of my lobby. Noah met her eyes for exactly 1 second, long enough to see she didn't recognize him, which was perfect because they'd been in the same elevator 3 times last week. Apologies, ma'am. I'll move to the perimeter. You'll move to unemployment if I see you anywhere near my guests. She turned to her assistant without waiting for a response. Jennifer, remind me why we haven't automated janitorial services. Surely technology has advanced past employing people who can't operate a basic mop. The assistant's face flushed. I'll note that for the facilities review, Ms. Vale. Vivian was already walking away, her heels clicking authority across the marble Noah had spent 3 hours making perfect. He watched her go, watched the 4 men adjust their positions to track her movement. Watched the crowd swallow her in congratulations and champagne. Then he went back to mopping his pattern, shifting subtly, positioning his bucket near the east corridor, angling his mop to block the sightline from the south entrance, creating small damp patches that would make running difficult but looked like careless mistakes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He waited until he'd pushed the mop to the supply closet's edge before checking. Lily, did you remember it's Pizza Friday? Noah's chest tightened. Pizza Friday. Their tradition, the one thing in their week that stayed constant. Every Friday at 8:30 p.m. he'd clock out, pick up a large pepperoni from Sal's, and bring it home to their tiny apartment, where Lily would already have plates set out, and her favorite movie queued up. He checked his watch. 7:51 p.m. Noah already ordered. Extra cheese like you like. See you at 8:30. Love you, Ladybug. Lily, love you, Infinity Daddy. Don't forget to breathe at work. He touched the bracelet again, the one she'd made for him in art therapy after her mom died. His therapist said it helped Lily process grief, making something protective for someone else when you felt small and scared yourself. She'd chosen blue because it's the color of calm daddy, like the ocean when it's not angry. Noah had worn it every day for 2 years and 3 months. Through the funeral, where Lily held his hand so tight, he lost feeling in his fingers. Through the nights, she woke up screaming for her mom. Through the morning, he'd turned in his federal credentials and accepted a night janitor position that paid a quarter of his old salary, but let him be home when Lily woke up from nightmares. Positions, the event coordinator barked into her headset. Ms. Vale takes the stage in 2 minutes. I need audio check, lighting confirmation, and someone tell me why there's still a maintenance worker in the lobby. Noah was already moving toward the service corridor, but his eyes never left the 4 men. They were closing in. The tall one had shifted to block the north exit. The broad one was moving toward the hallway that led to the executive elevators. The other 2 were converging on the presentation stage from opposite sides, their movements hidden by the crowd's focus on Vivian as she mounted the steps. Noah's mind ran calculations faster than conscious thought. Security was concentrated at the main entrance's standard protocol, exactly wrong for an internal threat. The nearest guard was 40 feet away, distracted by a minor altercation at the coat check. Response time from external security minimum, 90 seconds from the moment someone realized something was wrong. By then, it would be over. Vivian tapped the microphone, and the room fell into expectant silence. Good evening. 2 years ago, I told this board that Aurora Corporation needed to evolve or die. Tonight, I'm here to show you evolution. The presentation screen lit up behind her market projections, growth charts, and animation of their new product that Noah knew was based on technology they'd acquired through methods his investigation had already documented. We didn't get here by playing it safe. Vivian continued, her voice carrying the particular confidence of someone who'd never been truly challenged. We got here by making hard choices, by cutting what doesn't work, by refusing to carry dead weight. Noah saw the broad man's hand move to his hip. Everything slowed down. This was the moment, the split second, where he had to decide. Stay invisible, let events play out, maintain his cover, and complete the investigation that would bring down Aurora's entire corrupt executive structure. Or step forward, reveal himself, and save a woman who'd called him furniture 2 months ago and dead weight 30 seconds ago. He looked down at his wrist. Breathe, Daddy. Lily's voice in his head, clear as morning. You said heroes don't have to be loud, Daddy. Sometimes heroes are just people who see something wrong and can't walk away. Noah set down his mop, wiped his hands on his uniform, and started walking toward the stage. The tall man saw him first. Their eyes met across the lobby, and Noah watched recognition flare, not of identity, but of threat. The man's hand moved inside his jacket. Excuse me. Noah's voice was quiet, conversational, pitched just loud enough to carry to the 4 men. You gentlemen planning to slip on this wet floor or planning to commit a crime? The room didn't hear him. They were focused on Vivian's presentation, on the glittering promise of profit. But the 4 men heard. They froze. Noah kept walking, his pace steady, unthreatening. 20 feet. 15. He could see the calculation in their eyes: abort or adapt, retreat or attack. The broad one made the choice for all of them. Security, he shouted, pointing at Noah. This man is disrupting the presentation. Remove him immediately. Every head turned. Vivian stopped mid-sentence, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to disdain in the space of a heartbeat. Oh, for God's sake! Her voice dripped contempt. Security, please escort the janitor out of my event. Apparently he's confused about where staff are allowed during executive functions. The nearest security guard started toward Noah, but his training let him see what others missed: Noah's stance, the way he'd positioned himself between the 4 men and the stage, the absolute calm in his eyes. Ma'am, the guard said slowly. I think. The tall man moved. Later witnesses would argue about what happened next. Some would say Noah threw the first punch. Others would swear the attackers rushed him. The security footage, which would be analyzed by 3 separate federal agencies, would show something more nuanced. A janitor who moved like water, finding its level defensive and devastating in equal measure. The tall man lunged. Noah stepped inside the attack, caught the extended arm, and used the man's momentum to send him sliding across the marble floor Noah had made perfectly dangerously slick 3 minutes earlier. The man's head cracked against a decorative pillar with a sound like a dropped melon. Noah Hale. The broad man's voice was sharp with recognition now. We know who you are. Stand down. But Noah was already moving. The second attacker came from the left, pulling something from his jacket. A weapon, a radio. Noah didn't wait to find out. He grabbed his mop from where he'd left it, snapped it horizontal, and drove the handle into the man's solar plexus. The attacker folded like origami. Someone call the police, a guest screamed. What the hell is happening? Vivian shouted from the stage, her polished composure cracking. Security! Security! The third man tackled Noah from behind, driving them both toward the ground. Noah twisted mid-fall, catching the marble with his shoulder instead of his head, using the rotation to throw his attacker over and into the mop bucket. Soapy water exploded across the floor, turning the lobby into an ice rink. The fourth man, the one with the bad vendor badge, had reached Vivian's stage. He grabbed her arm, yanking her down from the platform. "Ms. Vale," he hissed, "you're coming with us. Your father sends his regards." And there it was. The confirmation Noah had suspected for weeks. Vivian's face went white. "My father is dead." "Your father," the man said, dragging her toward the blocked exit, "is very much alive, and very, very disappointed in how you've been running his company." Noah was on his feet, slipping slightly on his own wet floor, but using the slide to build momentum. He reached them in 3 strides, grabbed the man's wrist where it gripped Vivian's arm, and applied pressure to the nerve cluster his instructor had called the off switch. The man's hand spasmed open. Vivian stumbled backward. "Run," Noah told her. She didn't move. She stood frozen, staring at him like he'd transformed from janitor to something else entirely, which, in a way, he had. The man with the spasming hand recovered faster than Noah expected. He swung wild, caught Noah across the jaw, sent him reeling back 3 steps. Blood filled Noah's mouth, copper and sharp. "You don't know what you're protecting," the man snarled. "This woman destroyed her own father, embezzled millions, and blamed it on a cardiac arrest. We're here for justice." "Justice," Noah said, spitting blood onto the marble he'd cleaned, "doesn't usually involve kidnapping people at corporate events." He pulled a zip tie from his pocket, the heavy-duty kind meant for securing equipment repurposed weeks ago when he'd started carrying them. In one smooth motion, he caught the man's reaching hand, twisted it behind his back, and secured both wrists. The man dropped to his knees. Noah looked up. The other 3 attackers were down, one unconscious against the pillar, one gasping for air on the wet floor, one tangled in the mop bucket with a security guard's knee in his back. 47 seconds. Noah checked his watch to be sure. From first contact to last zip tie, 47 seconds. The lobby was chaos. Guests shouting security, converging, someone screaming about lawsuits. And in the center of it all, Vivian Vale stared at Noah with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Who are you?" she whispered. Noah reached into his pocket slowly, carefully, with security guards pointing weapons at him from 3 directions. He pulled out a leather credential wallet, flipped it open. The badge caught the lobby lights like a tiny sun. Federal Corporate Integrity Monitor, Department of Justice. Agent Noah Hale. Badge number 47823. Vivian's face went through several expressions at once. Shock, confusion, dawning horror. "You're..." she started. "I'm the janitor," Noah said quietly. "I'm also the federal agent who's been documenting your company's safety violations, embezzlement schemes, and corporate fraud for the last 6 months. And these 4 men," he gestured to the attackers. "They're probably working for whoever your father really is, or was, or whoever hired them to make it look that way. Either way, you've got bigger problems than wet floors now, Ms. Vale." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Noah's phone buzzed. He checked it despite the gun still pointed in his direction. "Lily Daddy, it's 8:10. Are you coming soon? I'm really hungry and I already set out the plates." His chest tightened. "Pizza Friday. Their one sacred thing. I need to make a phone call," he said to the nearest security guard. The guard blinked. "Sir, you need to stay right there until..." "My daughter is 7 years old and waiting for me to bring her pizza. I will cooperate fully with your investigation, but first, I'm calling my little girl." Something in his voice made the guard lower his weapon slightly. "One call. Make it quick." Noah dialed his hands steadier than they'd been during the fight. "Daddy." Lily's voice was small, worried. "Hey, Ladybug, I'm going to be a little late tonight." "Are you okay?" That edge of panic, the one that lived in her voice since the night her mom died. "I'm fine, baby. I'm completely fine. I just had to help someone at work. But I already ordered the pizza, and I asked Mrs. Chen from downstairs to pick it up and bring it to you, okay? She has a key." "Mrs. Chen smells like cabbage." "I know, but she makes excellent company until I get there. Can you be brave for me? Watch your movie. Eat some pizza and I promise I'll be home before bedtime. A long pause. Then, "Did you breathe, Daddy?" Noah looked at his bracelet, at the glitter letters Lily had painted 2 years ago. "Yeah, Ladybug." I breathed. "Okay. I love you, infinity. I love you, infinity +1. He hung up as federal agents poured through the lobby doors, his colleagues, his backup, the people who'd been monitoring his investigation from a safe distance. As they secured the scene and began processing the attackers, Noah stood in the center of the chaos he'd created, still wearing his janitor's uniform, still tasting blood from the punch he'd taken. Vivian hadn't moved. She stood on the edge of the stage, her white dress somehow still pristine, staring at him with an expression that might have been respect or might have been rage. "You were invisible," she said finally. "All this time you were right there, and I never saw you." Noah picked up his mop from where it had fallen. The handle was cracked from the fight, probably beyond repair. "That," he said quietly, "was kind of the point, ma'am." The federal team lead approached Jackson, who'd trained Noah years ago, who'd convinced him to take this assignment, even though it meant night shifts and invisibility, and missing the kind of father-daughter time that couldn't be recovered. "Clean work, Hale," Jackson said, respect clear in his voice. "We got it all on tape. The attack, the response, her reaction. More than enough to—" "I need to leave," Noah interrupted. "It's Pizza Friday." Jackson's expression softened. "Go. We'll debrief tomorrow. And hail that thing with the mop that's going in the training manual." Noah nodded once, set down the broken mop, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he heard Vivian's voice. "Wait, Agent Hale, I need to understand. If you're federal, if you were investigating us, why did you save me? You could have let them take me, made your case easier." Noah stopped but didn't turn around. "My daughter asks me every night if I helped anyone today," he said. "I don't lie to her." He walked out of Aurora Tower into the cool October night, leaving behind the marble floors and crystal lights and people who thought they owned the world. His jaw ached, his shoulder would bruise, but his phone was already showing a text from Mrs. Chen. "She is eating pizza and smiling. Take your time." Noah smiled too, touched his blue bracelet and headed home. Because some nights you save the CEO, and some nights you make it home for Pizza Friday. And if you're very, very lucky, you get to do both. The pizza was cold by the time Noah pushed through the apartment door at 9:17 p.m., but Lily didn't seem to care. She launched herself at him from the couch, arms wrapping around his waist, with enough force to make his bruised ribs protest. He didn't flinch. "You're late," she said into his chest. "Mrs. Chen had to leave at 9 because of her cat's medicine. I've been alone for 17 whole minutes." Noah kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry shampoo smell that meant home more than any address ever could. "I'm sorry, Ladybug. Work was complicated tonight." She pulled back, studying his face with the unnerving intensity only 7-year-old daughters possessed. Her finger traced the air near his jaw, not quite touching. "You have a bruise. Right there. It's purple." "I bumped into a door." "Doors don't make bruises that color." She crossed her arms in exact miniature of her mother's skeptical pose. "That's a knuckle bruise. Someone hit you." Noah's throat tightened. Sarah had taught their daughter too well how to read injuries, how to spot lies, how to ask questions that cut through comfortable evasions. It was one of the things he'd loved about his wife back when she was alive, to use those skills as an ER nurse. Now it made parenting both easier and impossibly harder. "Someone did hit me," he admitted, sitting on the couch and pulling her down beside him. "But I'm okay. See, all parts still working." Lily's eyes filled with the particular shine that meant tears were close. "You said the janitoring job was safe. You promised when you quit being a policeman that the new job wouldn't have hitting." "I wasn't a policeman, I was—" He stopped. They'd had this conversation before. To Lily, anyone who carried a badge and helped people was a policeman, and the distinction between federal agent and local law enforcement didn't matter when you were 7 and terrified of losing your only remaining parent. "I know what I promised," he said instead, gathering her close. "And I meant it. Tonight was unusual. Very unusual. It won't happen again." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But it was the kind of lie that let a little girl sleep at night, so Noah told it anyway. She was quiet for a long moment, picking at a loose thread on his uniform sleeve. Then, Mrs. Chen said there was something on the news about Aurora Tower. She turned it off before I could see, but I heard them say, "Attack," and "Federal Agent." And then she got really weird and said we should watch cartoons instead. Of course it was already on the news. Of course Lily had heard. Noah's phone had been buzzing non-stop during the drive home. Jackson, the bureau chief. 3 different news outlets who'd somehow gotten his personal number and 1 call from a blocked number he'd let go to voicemail. "There was an incident at the building where I work," he said carefully. "Some bad people tried to hurt someone and I helped stop them. That's all. Everyone's safe now." "Were you scared?" The question caught him off guard. Not because it was unexpected. Lily asked it every time anything remotely dangerous entered their conversations, but because he didn't have a good answer. "No," he said truthfully. "When things like that happen, there's no time to be scared. You just do what needs doing." "Like when Mommy was sick. You weren't scared then either." His chest constricted. "I was terrified then, Ladybug. That was different. Because you couldn't do anything. Because some things can't be fixed with training or quick thinking or—" His voice cracked. He cleared it. "Some things, you just have to survive." Lily leaned her head against his shoulder, her small hand finding his wrist, touching the blue bracelet. "I'm glad you breathed tonight, even with the hitting." They sat in silence, the half-eaten pizza congealing on paper plates, some animated movie playing on mute, because Lily had turned the sound off when Mrs. Chen left, and never turned it back on. Through the thin apartment walls, Noah could hear the Rodriguezes arguing in Spanish, the Chang's baby crying, the steady drip of the bathroom faucet he kept meaning to fix. This was his real life, not marble lobbies or federal investigations or CEOs in white dresses. This threadbare couch and strawberry shampoo and a daughter who checked his face for bruises and reminded him to breathe. His phone buzzed again. Jackson's name on the screen, the 4th call in an hour. "You need to answer," Lily said without looking up. "It's the work phone buzz, different from the regular buzz." "How do you—" "I notice things, like you notice things." She sat up, smoothing her pajama shirt with the kind of deliberate maturity that made her seem 40 instead of 7. "I'll finish my pizza. You can talk in the kitchen." "But Daddy—" Her voice got small again. "You're still tucking me in, right? You promised." "Wouldn't miss it for the world." In the kitchen, really just a corner of their studio apartment separated by a counter that had seen better decades. Noah finally answered. "Hale." Jackson's voice was tight. "I've been calling for an hour. I was with my daughter. You know the reason I took this assignment, work-life balance? That balance just got complicated. We need you downtown, now." Noah pressed his palm against the chipped Formica counter. "It's 9:30 on a Friday night. Lily has school Monday morning and I'm not leaving her alone. The 4 men you took down, they're not talking. Not to us, not to their lawyers, not to anyone. And Vivian Vale has lawyered up so thoroughly we can't get within 10 feet of her. But here's the interesting part. 3 hours ago, someone transferred $40 million from an offshore account registered to Aurora Corporation into a charity fund for families of janitorial staff nationwide." Noah's mind raced through the implications. That's not guilt. That's strategy. That's what I thought too, until her lawyer sent over a personal message specifically requesting to speak with you. Not the bureau, not the investigation team. You. By name. Agent Noah Hale, the janitor who saved her life. Through the thin wall he could hear Lily singing quietly to herself, some song from the movie Off-Key and Perfect. In 6 hours, she'd wake up for Saturday morning cartoons. In 8 hours, they had her art therapy appointment, the one that helped her process the grief that still showed up in nightmares and separation anxiety. In 10 hours, he'd promised to take her to the park, just the two of them, like they did every Saturday when he wasn't working. Monday, Noah said. I'll come in Monday. Hale. Monday, that's the deal. I work nights so I can be there for my daughter during the day. You want me to maintain this cover. You want me to finish this investigation, then you respect that I'm a father first and an agent second. A long pause. Then, Monday, 9 a.m. But Noah. Whatever she wants to tell you, it's bigger than we thought. The money trail we've been following. It doesn't just go to Vale, it goes to her father who supposedly died 2 years ago, but whose death certificate has more red flags than a Chinese parade. It goes to 7 board members. It goes to 3 senators. And it goes in one very interesting transaction to a shell company that purchased the building where you live. Noah's blood went cold. Say that again. Your apartment building. Aurora Corporation owns it through a subsidiary, has for 6 months right around the time you moved in. You thought you found that place through a normal rental listing. But Hale, there's no record of it ever being publicly listed. Someone wanted you there. Someone knew who you were before you took this assignment. The drip of the faucet seemed suddenly louder. The baby's crying next door more distant. Noah's training kicked in, automatically scanning exits, checking sightlines, calculating how fast he could get Lily out if this was a trap closing. Are we compromised? I don't know, but I need you to come in tonight. Bring Lily if you have to. We have family rooms we can... No. The word came out harder than he intended. I'm not bringing my daughter into a federal building at night because of an investigation that might or might not be targeting her. Send a patrol car. Have them park outside. But I'm not moving her again, Jackson. I'm not waking her up scared and confused and telling her we have to leave another home. We've done that enough. Because they had. 3 times in 2 years. First from the house where Sarah died because Lily saw her mother in every corner. Then from Jackson's sister's place when Lily's nightmares got bad enough that she needed her own space. Then from the subsidized apartment in the South District when Noah got this assignment and needed to be closer to Aurora Tower. Each move was supposed to be the last one. Each time he'd promised Lily they were putting down roots. I'll send 2 units, Jackson said finally. Plainclothes unmarked cars. And Hale, keep your weapon close tonight. Noah looked at the locked box on the top shelf of the closet, the only thing in the apartment Lily wasn't allowed to touch. His service weapon unloaded, secured, barely touched in 6 months because janitors didn't carry guns, and this investigation required him to be completely, utterly invisible. Already planned on it, he said, and hung up. Lily was waiting on the couch, her pizza plate clean, her expression knowing. We're in trouble. It wasn't a question. Noah sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. We might be, I'm not sure yet, but just to be safe there are going to be some police cars outside tonight. If you look out the window, you'll see them. They're there to keep us extra safe, okay? Like bodyguards. Exactly like bodyguards. She processed this, her small face serious. Then, is this because you helped that lady? The one on TV? You saw the news. Mrs. Chen's phone. She was watching while she thought I was in the bathroom. Lily picked at the bracelet on her wrist, a newer one, bright blue with yellow stars that matched the one she'd made for Noah. They said a janitor stopped bad guys. They said he was secretly a hero. That was you, wasn't it? Noah pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs, steady and trusting. Yeah, Ladybug, that was me. I knew it. Her voice was muffled against his chest. You have the hero walk. Mommy used to say that. She said you walked like someone who'd run toward fires instead of away. And she loved you for it, and worried about it at the same time. His eyes burned. Sarah had said that the night before their wedding, half joking and half serious. Your father's going to give me a heart attack one day, she'd told her mother. He sees someone in trouble and his brain just switches off everything except help. Help, help. Your mom was a smart woman. She was. Lily pulled back, studying his face again. The lady you saved, is she nice? Or is she like the mean receptionist at my school who pretends to smile, but her eyes stay angry? Noah thought of Vivian Vale standing in the lobby, pristine and perfect, and calling him deadweight. Then he thought of her face when those men grabbed her, the fear that cracked through her carefully constructed armor. Then later her expression when he showed his badge, shock and horror, and something else he couldn't quite name. I don't know if she's nice, he said honestly, but she's complicated, and she's in trouble, and sometimes that's enough. Are you going to help her more, even though she was mean to janitors? Probably. Why? It was the kind of question only children asked, simple and impossible. Why help people who were cruel? Why risk yourself for strangers? Why choose danger when you had a daughter who needed you home? Because, Noah said slowly, if I only helped nice people, I'd be choosing who deserves safety. And that's not my job. My job is to help, period. The rest sorts itself out later. Lily considered this, her 7-year-old mind working through ethics that stumped philosophers. Finally she nodded. Okay, but you have to promise me something. What's that? When you help her more, you have to remember about Pizza Friday, and Park Saturdays, and tucking in. Because heroes have to do their jobs, but daddies have to do their jobs too. And your daddy job is more important. His throat closed completely. He managed to nod, managed to pull her into a hug that probably lasted too long, but felt like exactly enough. Deal, he whispered. Daddy job first. Always. They watched the rest of her movie in comfortable silence. Lily eventually falling asleep against his shoulder, her breathing deep and even. Noah stayed awake, watching the street through the thin curtains, counting the shadows that might be federal protection, or might be something else entirely. At 11:47 p.m., his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Unknown Agent Hale. This is Vivian Vale. I need to speak with you. Not at a federal building, not with lawyers, just you and me. I know things about Aurora that your investigation hasn't found, things about my father, things about why those men came for me tonight, things about why you're living in a building my company owns. Please. I'm not asking as a CEO. I'm asking as someone who just realized she's been blind. Noah stared at the message for a long time. Every protocol said, ignore it, report it, let the official channels handle contact with subjects under investigation. Every instinct said it was a trap or manipulation or both. But there was something in the phrasing, I know things about why you're living in a building my company owns, that made his skin prickle. He typed carefully one-handed, Lily still sleeping against his other shoulder. Noah. How did you get this number? Unknown. I'm a CEO. Getting unlisted numbers is the least impressive thing I can do. Will you meet me? Noah. When unknown tomorrow. 2 p.m. There's a coffee shop on Maple and 5th. Tiny place, no security cameras inside, run by a woman who asks no questions. I'll be alone. You can bring backup if you want, but I'm asking you to come alone. Noah. Why should I trust you? The reply came immediately. Unknown. You shouldn't. But you helped me anyway tonight. Even though I called you furniture. Even though I've spent 6 months walking past you like you were invisible. You helped because that's who you are. So I'm asking you to extend that same illogical trust one more time. Please. This is bigger than you know. And your daughter Lily, right? She deserves a father who finishes what he starts. Noah's blood turned to ice. She knew Lily's name, which meant either she'd researched him after tonight possible, or she'd known about him before. Which meant Jackson was right. This was bigger than corporate fraud. This was personal. Noah, if you've threatened my daughter in any way, unknown. I would never. I'm many things, Agent Hale, but I don't weaponize children. I know her name because it's in your personnel file, which I gained access to 3 hours ago when I started trying to understand who you really are. I know she's 7. I know she lost her mother 2 years ago. I know you take her to art therapy on Saturdays at 10 a.m., which is why I suggested 2 p.m., so you wouldn't have to choose between meeting me and being there for her. I'm not threatening your daughter. I'm trying to protect her. Because if what I suspect is true, she's already in more danger than you realize." Noah looked down at Lily, peaceful in sleep, her hand still touching his bracelet. Outside, a car engine started one of Jackson's units, changing position. Inside, the faucet dripped its steady rhythm, and the Chang's baby had finally stopped crying. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Except it wasn't. Noah, 2 p.m. "But I'm armed, and I will have backup within shouting distance. And if this is a setup, if you've put my daughter at risk in any way, CEO or not, investigation or not, I will make sure you regret it." Unknown. Understood. Thank you. And Agent Hale. I'm sorry. For tonight, for the way I treated you, for all of it. I know that doesn't matter now. But I needed to say it anyway. Noah didn't respond. He locked his phone, carefully shifted Lily in his arms, and carried her to bed, the tiny alcove separated by a curtain that served as her bedroom. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, made sure her nightlight was on, and her stuffed elephant was within reach. "Love you, Infinity Ladybug," he whispered. She stirred, slightly mumbled, "Infinity +1," and burrowed deeper under her blankets. Noah stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep, thinking about all the promises he'd made, and all the ways he'd tried to keep them. Then he went to the closet, retrieved his weapon from the lockbox, and spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, watching the street and wondering what truth Vivian Vale thought was worth meeting a federal agent in secret to reveal. At 1:32 a.m., Jackson called again. "Two of the attackers just posted bail," he said without preamble. "Someone paid $2 million cash. We're trying to track them, but hail, they vanished the second they hit the street. No phones, no credit cards, no digital footprint." "What about the other two?" "Still in custody. And here's the interesting part. They're the ones who seemed least important during the attack. The muscle, the followers, the real operators are gone." Noah's grip tightened on the phone. "Someone's cleaning house." "That's what I'm thinking. Which means everyone connected to tonight is a target. Including you. Including... Don't say it. Including your daughter Hale. I'm sorry, but we have to consider..." "I said don't say it." Noah's voice was steel. "I'll handle Lily's security. You focus on finding those two men. And Jackson, I'm meeting with Vivian Vale tomorrow at 2 p.m. Unofficial, off the record. She says she has information about why I'm living in Aurora-owned property." "Absolutely not. That's a clear violation of..." "I'm telling you as a courtesy, not asking permission. You want this investigation to move forward? You want to understand what we're actually dealing with. Then you let me do my job my way." Silence. Then, "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably. But not tomorrow. Tomorrow I have art therapy with my daughter at 10, lunch at noon, and a meeting with a scared CEO at 2. And I plan to survive all 3. He hung up before Jackson could argue, checked the locks on the door one more time, and finally allowed himself to close his eyes for something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite wakefulness, either, the state he'd learned in training where you rested, but never stopped listening, never stopped being ready. Outside, the city breathed its night rhythms. Inside, Lily dreamed whatever 7-year-olds dreamed, and Noah Hale, janitor, and federal agent and father. Above all, sat guard over the tiny kingdom of their apartment. His weapon close, his daughter closer, and the blue bracelet on his wrist reminding him with every breath that heroes didn't have to be loud. Sometimes heroes were just people who saw something wrong and couldn't walk away. Even when walking away would be so much easier. Even when staying meant danger. Even when the only armor you had was a child's bracelet and a promise to always, always come home. Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Noah had managed maybe 90 minutes of actual sleep, his body jerking awake every time a car passed or a neighbor's door slammed. By the time pale October sunlight filtered through the curtains, he'd already checked the locks 4 times, confirmed both federal units were still outside, and made Lily's favorite Saturday breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like butterflies. She emerged from behind her curtain at 7:43 a.m. elephant tucked under one arm, hair standing in directions that defied physics. She took one look at Noah's face and said, "You didn't sleep." "I slept enough." "Your eye twitches when you lie. Right there." She pointed at his left eye. "Mommy told me that. She said it was how she always knew when you were trying to protect her from scary work stuff." Noah flipped a pancake, watching the chocolate chips bubble. "Your mom knew me too well." "She said that too." Lily climbed onto the counter stool, swinging her legs. "She said loving you was like loving a superhero who forgot he couldn't actually fly. Exciting and terrifying in equal measure." His spatula slipped clattering against the pan. Sarah had said that the night Lily was born high on epidural and happiness holding their daughter and looking at Noah like he was everything good in the world condensed into one exhausted man. He hadn't known Lily had heard the story. "When did your mom tell you that?" "The night before she died." Lily's voice went soft. "She knew Daddy. She called me to her bed and told me all these things about you. She said I needed to remember them because she might not be there to remind me. She said you'd try to be strong for both of us, but someone had to be strong for you too. She said that was my job now." Noah set down the spatula, his hands shaking. He turned to face his daughter, 7 years old, and carrying the weight of a dying mother's final wishes. "Ladybug, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I want to." She met his eyes with Sarah's unflinching directness. "So when I ask if you slept and you lie, I'm going to call it out. Because that's my job." "Okay." He pulled her into a hug. Pancakes' forgotten boundaries between parent and child, blurring in the way grief sometimes demanded. "Okay. I didn't sleep. I was worried. But I'm okay. I promise." "Better." She pulled back, satisfied. "Now, can we eat? Art therapy is at 10, and Ms. Rodriguez says being hungry makes colors feel angry." They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, Lily chattering about the drawing she planned to make something about underwater castles and fish with rainbow scales. Noah listened with half his attention, while the other half ran through the day's logistics. Art therapy at 10, which would take an hour. Lunch at noon at the diner. Lily loved because they put whipped cream on everything. Then he'd drop her with Jackson's sister Marta, who Lily adored, and who had 3 kids of her own, and a house that felt safer than their apartment right now. Then the meeting with Vivian at 2. His phone buzzed with a text from Marta confirming she'd pick up Lily at 1:30, take her to the movies, keep her overnight if needed. Jackson's work probably. Noah was grateful and resentful in equal measure. Art therapy happened in a converted brownstone on the east side, run by a woman named Ms. Rodriguez, who'd lost her own husband to cancer and understood grief in ways that couldn't be taught. Lily brightened the moment they walked through the door, already pulling out construction paper and markers. "Mr. Hale." Ms. Rodriguez gestured Noah to her office, while Lily settled at the craft table with 2 other kids. "Can we talk for a moment?" Noah's stomach tightened. "Is Lily okay?" "Lily is remarkably okay considering what she's been through. That's actually what I wanted to discuss." Ms. Rodriguez pulled out a folder, opened it to show a series of drawings. "These are from the last month. Notice anything?" Noah studied the pictures. Lily's art had evolved from dark, chaotic scribbles in the early days after Sarah's death to more structured images, houses, flowers, stick figures, holding hands. But these recent ones showed something new. A tall figure clearly meant to be him, standing between smaller figures and shadowy shapes. In every picture, the tall figure wore a blue bracelet. "She's processing you as a protector," Ms. Rodriguez said gently, "which is healthy. Children need to feel safe, but Noah, in every single drawing you're protecting someone else. Other children. Adults. In this one, you're protecting a woman in white, while Lily watches from the corner. When I asked her about it, she said, "Daddy helps everyone, even people who are mean to him, because that's what heroes do." Noah's chest constricted. The woman in white. She drew this yesterday morning before whatever happened last night. So unless Lily is psychic, she's been observing patterns, you helping others at your own expense, and she's internalizing that as normal. Ms. Rodriguez leaned forward. "I'm not saying don't be a hero, Noah. I'm saying make sure your daughter knows she's allowed to be your priority. That helping others doesn't mean she comes second." Through the glass office wall, he could see Lily laughing with another child, completely absorbed in creating something with glitter and glue. She looked happy. She looked safe. She looked like a kid who didn't spend her nights checking if her father had bruises or counting the hours until he came home. "I always put her first," Noah said, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Do you? Because your sister-in-law called me yesterday concerned? She said you've been taking extra shifts coming home exhausted, and that Lily told her you have a hero walk. That means you're going toward danger instead of away." Ms. Rodriguez's expression was kind but firm. "I know you're trying to provide for her. I know you're doing your best, but Noah, that child has already lost one parent. Make sure she doesn't lose the second one to a misplaced sense of obligation." The words hit like a physical blow. Noah opened his mouth to argue, to explain about the investigation and the cover, and how this was all temporary just until they closed the case. But Ms. Rodriguez had already turned back to the window, watching Lily create her underwater castle, and Noah realized with sudden clarity that nothing he said would matter as much as what he did. "I have a meeting this afternoon," he heard himself say. "Something related to work. It might be dangerous. I was going to have Marta take Lily for the night just in case." That's wise. But after this meeting, whatever happens, ask yourself if it's worth it, really worth it. Because these years with her, Noah, you don't get them back. And all the safety in the world doesn't matter if she's safe but alone. He sat in that office for another 10 minutes, watching his daughter create something beautiful from paper and glue, and wondered when protecting people had started to feel like abandoning the one person who mattered most. When the session ended, Lily presented him with her finished artwork, an elaborate underwater scene where rainbow fish swam around a castle, and in the corner, barely visible, a small figure with a blue bracelet stood on the shore watching over everything. "That's you," Lily said, pointing. "You're making sure nothing bad happens to the fish. But see, you're not in the water with them. You're on land. Because Ms. Rodriguez says protectors need to remember to protect themselves too, or they can't protect anyone." Noah knelt to her level, this wise 7-year-old, with her mother's eyes and her own hard-earned understanding of loss. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just worry too much to notice." She kissed his cheek, leaving a glitter mark he wouldn't discover until hours later. "Can we get milkshakes with lunch, the extra-large ones?" "Absolutely." They had lunch at Murphy's Diner, where Lily ordered chicken fingers and a strawberry milkshake so large it required 2 hands to lift. She told him about school, about her friend Emma's birthday party next week, about the book report she had to write on a biography. Normal things. Safe things. Things that existed in a world where fathers didn't meet informants in secret coffee shops, and daughters didn't draw pictures of protectors who stood alone. At 1:30, Marta arrived in her minivan that smelled like Cheerios and hope. Her own 3 kids were already buckled in, and they greeted Lily with the enthusiasm of cousins who were really more like siblings. "You sure about this?" Marta asked Noah quietly, while Lily grabbed her overnight bag from his car. "Jackson called me, told me to keep her until you give the all clear. Said this might be serious." "It might be. I don't know yet. But I need to know she's somewhere safe while I figure it out." Marta studied his face with the same penetrating gaze her brother had, the kind that came from years of reading people in dangerous situations. She'd been a cop too before the kids, before she decided life was too short to spend it chasing criminals instead of raising babies. "You look like hell, Noah. When's the last time you slept more than 3 hours?" "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." She gripped his arm, her voice dropping. Whatever you're walking into today, make sure you walk back out. Because that little girl has already lost too much. Don't make her lose you too. I won't, I promise. Your wife made you promise things too. About being careful, about coming home. And she died anyway because sometimes promises aren't enough. Marta's eyes were fierce. So don't promise, just do it. Come back, however you have to, whatever it takes. Lily appeared then, backpack slung over her shoulder, excitement bright on her face. Marta says we're doing a movie marathon and making pizza from scratch. Can I stay until tomorrow? You can stay as long as you want, Ladybug. She hugged him tight, her voice muffled against his chest. Remember to breathe, Daddy. And remember your daddy job is more important than your hero job. I'll remember. He watched them drive away. Lily's face pressed to the window, waving until they turned the corner. Then he stood in the diner parking lot, checking his weapon, checking his phone, checking the street for anything that looked wrong. Jackson had sent 3 texts, each more urgent than the last. The 2 escaped attackers had been spotted near the Canadian border, then lost again. Vivian Vale's lawyers had withdrawn their cooperation. The federal prosecutor was threatening to shut down the entire investigation if they didn't produce something concrete within 48 hours. Noah deleted all 3 texts and drove to Maple and 5th. The coffee shop was exactly as Vivian had described, tiny, wedged between a laundromat and a used bookstore. The kind of place that survived on loyal locals rather than tourist traffic. No security cameras visible outside, no clear sightlines from the street. Either she'd chosen well, or this was the perfect place for an ambush. He was 15 minutes early. He used the time to walk the perimeter, mark exits, identify potential threats. A homeless man sleeping in the alley, genuine based on the smell, and the shopping cart full of actual belongings. An elderly couple in the bookstore. A mother with a stroller waiting for laundry. All normal, all safe. Except nothing felt safe. At exactly 2 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. No driver. Vivian emerged alone, dressed in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Noah's monthly rent, but looked almost normal, almost human. She'd pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail, and without the armor of her CEO wardrobe, she looked younger, vulnerable. She saw him, immediately nodded once, and walked into the coffee shop. Noah waited another 30 seconds, scanning for backup or surveillance. Nothing obvious. He touched his blue bracelet, thought of Lily, safe with Marta, and followed. Inside the shop was warm and cluttered, mismatched furniture and walls covered in local art. An older woman behind the counter looked up, recognized Vivian, and simply nodded toward a corner booth. The kind of recognition that spoke of regular visits, of a relationship built on coffee and silence. Vivian sat with her back to the wall, tactical positioning she probably didn't even realize she'd chosen. Noah took the opposite seat, keeping his hands visible on the table. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You said my daughter was in danger. That tends to motivate me." "I said she might be in danger. There's a difference." Vivian wrapped her hands around a coffee cup that had appeared without Noah ordering. "The woman who owns this place, her name is Margaret. She's deaf. She reads lips when she wants to and ignores conversations when she doesn't. This place has been my sanctuary for 3 years. The only place in the city where I'm not being watched or recorded or judged. You're being watched now. I have 2 federal agents within shouting distance." "I know. I saw them when I arrived. That one outside pretending to read a newspaper. Tell him the style section hasn't been printed on actual paper in 5 years. It's a dead giveaway." Despite himself, Noah almost smiled. "I'll pass that along. Now you want to tell me why we're really here? You didn't risk meeting a federal agent in secret just to critique our surveillance techniques." Vivian took a long breath, her fingers tightening on the coffee cup. "My father's name was Richard Vale. He founded Aurora Corporation 43 years ago, with money from a defense contract and a willingness to make decisions other people found unconscionable. He built an empire on the principle that profit trumps ethics, that image matters more than truth, and that people are resources to be used and discarded. I've read his file, And his death certificate. Heart attack 2 years ago, very sudden, very convenient. Convenient is exactly the word. Vivian's voice was bitter. He didn't die, Agent Hale. He staged his death because I was about to expose him for embezzling from his own company. I found the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the bribes to regulatory officials. I gathered evidence. I went to the board, and my father, the man who taught me everything I know about business, looked me in the eye and said, "Sweetheart, you're thinking too small. This isn't embezzlement. This is strategy." Noah leaned forward. What happened next? I told him I was going to the authorities. He told me that if I did, he'd make sure I went down with him. That every illegal transaction had my digital signature, my approval, my fingerprints all over it. He'd been setting me up for years, grooming me to be his perfect scapegoat. Her voice cracked. 3 days later, he had a massive heart attack at a board meeting. Died before the ambulance arrived. I inherited everything: the company, the scandal, the choice between exposing a dead man or protecting the empire he built. So you chose the empire. I chose survival. I was 27 years old, suddenly in charge of a multi-billion-dollar corporation with rot in every corner, and the only person who knew where the bodies were buried was supposedly 6 feet under. Vivian met his eyes. But he's not dead, Noah. Those men who came for me last night, they mentioned my father by name. They said he sent his regards, which means either I am losing my mind, or Richard Vale has been alive this whole time watching me run his company, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim what he thinks is his. Noah's mind raced through implications. The $40 million you transferred to the janitorial charity fund was from one of his offshore accounts, money he thought was hidden. I've spent 2 years tracking down every dollar he stole, every dirty deal he made, and I've been quietly redistributing it. Not to myself. To the people Aurora hurt. The employees we laid off. The communities our factories poisoned. The janitors we paid poverty wages while executives made millions. She laughed, harsh and broken. You were one of them. When I called you furniture, when I dismissed you as dead weight, I was being exactly what my father taught me to be. It took having you save my life to realize how completely I'd become him. This doesn't explain why I'm living in an Aurora-owned building. No, that's... Vivian pulled out her phone, slid it across the table. On the screen was a property document dated 6 months ago. My father's signature, or a perfect forgery. He purchased the building 3 weeks before you moved in, before you took the assignment, before the federal investigation officially started. Which means either he's psychic, or someone in the federal system told him I was coming. Noah's blood turned cold. Someone on my team is dirty. Or someone in my company is still loyal to him and feeding him information. Or both. Vivian's hands were shaking now. Noah, I didn't know about this until last night. I started digging the moment I got home from Aurora Tower, pulling every property record, every financial transaction, every piece of data I could access. And it's all there. A pattern of purchases and sales and movements that track your life. Not just your apartment. The art therapy office where you take your daughter Aurora owns the building through a subsidiary. Murphy's Diner, where you had lunch today, we hold the lease. Your daughter's school sits on land that Aurora donated to the city 15 years ago, with reversionary clauses that let us reclaim it under certain conditions. Noah stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Every protective instinct screamed at him to call Marta to get Lily to run somewhere his daughter hadn't been mapped and tracked and surrounded by a dead man's architecture. Sit down, Vivian said urgently. Please, running now alerts whoever's watching that we've figured it out. And Noah, if my father is alive, if he's been orchestrating this, then he's already 10 steps ahead. The only advantage we have is that he doesn't know we know. My daughter is safe. I had my personal security team do a quiet sweep of your sister-in-law's neighborhood. No surveillance, no unusual activity, no indication anyone's watching her. Your daughter is the one piece of your life Aurora doesn't own, which suggests she's leveraged their saving for later. Noah sat back down, his mind working through scenarios, each worse than the last. Your father wants his company back. He's been positioning pieces on a board I didn't even know existed. And somehow, I'm part of his game. You're not part of it. You're the catalyst. Vivian's voice was intense. Think about it. A federal agent goes undercover as a janitor to investigate Aurora. He documents violations, builds a case, becomes invisible to everyone except he's not actually invisible. He's being watched the whole time by a man who's supposedly dead. And then, at a product launch, 4 men attack. The janitor reveals himself as a federal agent. The CEO realizes she's been complicit in her father's crimes. And suddenly, everyone is exposed. Everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is exactly where he wants them. Noah's phone buzzed. Jackson. The 2 escaped attackers were found dead 20 minutes ago. Professional hits execution style, no witnesses. Whatever you're doing with Vale, finish it fast and get somewhere secure. This whole thing just went from investigation to active threat. He showed Vivian the message. She went pale. He's cleaning house. Everyone who can connect him to last night is being eliminated. Her voice was barely a whisper. Noah, I think I'm next. And I think that's exactly what he wants. Me dead, the company in chaos, and him riding in to save the day. The prodigal father returns grief-stricken over his daughter's tragic murder, ready to reclaim his legacy. Then we don't give him what he wants. Noah stopped. Through the coffee shop window, he saw a car pull up. Black sedan-tinted windows identical to the one Vivian had arrived in, except Vivian was sitting across from him. That's not your car. No, that's... Her face went white. That's my father's car. The one he drove for 20 years. I sold it after he died. How is it? The door opened. A man stepped out. 60s silver hair, expensive suit, walking with the confidence of someone who owned the ground beneath his feet. Richard Vale was very much alive, and he was walking straight toward the coffee shop, a smile on his face like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Noah's hand moved to his weapon before conscious thought caught up. Vivian grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't. Not here. Margaret doesn't deserve to have blood on her floors because of my family's dysfunction. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled against his skin. And if you pull that gun, you give him exactly what he wants. Proof that I'm conspiring with federal agents, that I've betrayed the company, that everything he's about to claim is justified. He sent men to kidnap you last night. Did he send men to create a situation where a heroic janitor would reveal himself, where I'd be vulnerable enough to reach out to that same janitor, where we'd meet in secret and confirm every paranoid theory about corruption and conspiracy? Vivian's eyes never left her father as he approached the door. My father doesn't do anything without 3 backup plans. We're living in one of them right now. The bell above the door chimed as Richard Vale entered. Margaret looked up from behind the counter, and her expression shifted recognition, distaste, and something that might have been pity, all compressed into a single glance, before she deliberately turned away, busying herself with coffee grounds that didn't need grinding. Vivian. Richard's voice was warm, paternal, completely at odds with the fear in his daughter's eyes. And you must be Agent Hale. Or should I call you Noah? We're practically family at this point, given how intimately you've become acquainted with my company's inner workings. Noah stood positioning himself between Richard and Vivian without making it obvious. Mr. Vale, you look remarkably healthy for a dead man. Death is surprisingly negotiable when you have the right resources. Richard slid into the booth uninvited, forcing Noah to either sit back down or stand there looking awkward. Noah sat, keeping his hands visible, his body angled to move fast if needed. I apologize for the theatrics last night. Those 4 men were supposed to create a credible threat, nothing more. Things got out of hand when you intervened with such, what did the security footage call it, devastating efficiency. Quite impressive for a janitor. I'm a federal agent investigating corporate fraud. Being impressive is part of the job description. Indeed. And you've done excellent work. 6 months of documentation, hundreds of violations, cataloged enough evidence to dismantle Aurora Corporation piece by piece. Richard signaled to Margaret, who ignored him completely. He didn't seem bothered. The problem, Noah, is that you've been documenting the wrong crimes. Or rather, crimes that no longer matter, because the person who committed them is legally dead. Vivian found her voice sharp and cold. You can't be serious. You staged your death, which is fraud. You're alive, which means every asset transfer, every will execution, every legal document from the past 2 years is void. You don't get to just walk back into my own company, the one I built from nothing, the one I groomed you to run until you decided morality was more important than survival. Richard's warmth evaporated. Sweetheart, I've spent 2 years watching you dismantle everything I created, redistributing my money to people who don't deserve it, implementing safety protocols that cut into profit margins, turning Aurora into a charity instead of a corporation. Did you really think I'd let that continue? I was fixing your mistakes, cleaning up the poison you left behind. You were destroying my legacy. Richard leaned forward, and Noah saw where Vivian had learned her intensity. But I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to make you an offer. Both of you, actually. Noah's instincts screamed trap. I don't make deals with people under investigation. You will when the alternative is watching your daughter grow up without a father. Richard said it casually, like commenting on the weather. Lily, age 7, attends Riverside Elementary, loves strawberry milkshakes, sees a therapist named Ms. Rodriguez every Saturday morning. Currently staying with Marta Chen and her 3 children at 847 Maple Grove Drive. Lovely neighborhood, very safe. Unless, of course, it isn't. Noah was moving before he realized it. His hand on Richard's throat, slamming the older man back against the booth with enough force to rattle the table. Coffee spilled. Margaret looked over, assessed the situation with one glance, and went back to her grinding. You threatened my daughter again, Noah said quietly. And dead or alive, I will end you. Do you understand? Richard didn't struggle. He smiled. There he is, the real Noah Hale. Not the compliant janitor or the by-the-book federal agent. The father who'd burn down the world to keep his child safe. That's the man I need. Noah released him, stepping back. His hands shaking with rage he couldn't afford to show. Vivian had gone white, her eyes moving between her father and Noah like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. Sit down, Noah, please. Let me explain before you do something we'll all regret. Richard straightened his collar, completely unruffled. I'm not threatening Lily. I'm acknowledging reality. You're investigating Aurora, which means you've made powerful enemies. Not just me. The 7 board members whose embezzlement you've documented. The 3 senators whose bribes you've traced. The regulatory officials who've been taking payouts for years. You think any of them will let you walk away with evidence that destroys their lives? That's why I have federal protection. Federal protection? Richard laughed, bitter and sharp. Noah, do you know who authorized your undercover assignment, Assistant Director Marcus Webb? Do you know who Marcus Webb's brother is? Gerald Webb, Aurora's Chief Financial Officer, currently under investigation for tax fraud. Your protection comes from a man whose family I've owned for 15 years. How safe do you think you really are? The implications hit like a freight train. Noah thought of Jackson's messages, the timing of information leaks, the way the 2 attackers had vanished so efficiently after posting bail. If Webb was compromised, if the investigation itself was tainted from the top, then everything Noah had built for 6 months was worthless. Worse than worthless. It was a trap that had already sprung. You're lying, Noah said, but it sounded hollow. Am I call Jackson right now? Ask him who approved the safe house locations for your daughter. Ask him why those locations keep changing. Ask him if he's noticed that every time you move Lily somewhere new, someone from Webb's office gets a courtesy notification for interagency coordination. Go ahead. I'll wait. Noah's phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He pulled it out, started to dial Jackson, then stopped. Because if Richard was telling the truth, this conversation was already being monitored. And if Jackson was being kept in the dark about his own superior's corruption, then calling him now would only put him at risk too. Vivian spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. "What do you want, Dad?" "You didn't come here just to gloat about how thoroughly you've compromised federal law enforcement. I came to offer a solution." Noah continues his investigation, but he redirects it. Not at Aurora Corporation, but at the real corruption, the regulatory capture, the political bribes, the systemic rot that goes far beyond one company. He has the access, the cover, the perfect position to gather evidence on people who actually deserve to burn. In exchange, I ensure Lily's safety, not through threats, but through genuine protection. The same resources I've used to track your lives can be used to shield them. "And what do you get out of this?" Noah's voice was ice. "I get my company back. Vivian steps down, cites health reasons or family priorities, and I return from my unfortunate misdiagnosis of death. The board welcomes back their founder. Aurora continues operating as it always has. And everyone wins. Except the people your company hurts, the workers you exploit, the communities you poison." Noah leaned forward. "You're asking me to ignore everything I've spent 6 months documenting in exchange for protection I shouldn't need if you weren't threatening me in the first place. That's not a deal. That's extortion. It's survival, and it's better than the alternative." Richard's expression hardened. "Option 2 is that I release documentation showing Vivian has been embezzling from Aurora for 2 years. Her digital signatures on every illegal transaction I ever made, all authenticated, all damning. She goes to prison. You lose your investigation because your primary witness is discredited. And Lily, well, Lily grows up visiting her father in witness protection, always moving, always hiding, never safe, because you insisted on being a hero instead of being smart." Vivian made a sound like she'd been punched. "You'd really do that? Send your own daughter to prison for crimes you committed?" "I'd do whatever necessary to protect what I built. You know that. I taught you that." Richard's voice softened, became almost gentle. "Sweetheart, this doesn't have to be adversarial. Work with me. Come back to Aurora not as CEO, but as my partner. We'll fix the company together the right way, the profitable way, and we'll be a family again. We were never a family. We were a corporation with shared DNA." Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping. "I'm not coming back. I'm not stepping down. And I'm certainly not letting you waltz back into a company you already destroyed once. You want Aurora? You'll have to take it. But I'll fight you with everything I have." Richard sighed like a parent disappointed by a stubborn child. "I was afraid you'd say that. Which brings us to Plan C." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen once, and slid it across the table. Noah's blood froze. The screen showed a photograph time-stamped 40 minutes ago. Lily sitting in Marta's minivan, visible through the window, laughing at something one of the other kids had said. The angle suggested it had been taken from another car close enough to see the blue bracelet on her wrist. "The man who took this photo," Richard said calmly, "is currently parked 3 houses down from Marta's residence. He'll stay there harmless and invisible as long as you and I reach an understanding. But if you choose to be difficult, if you insist on playing hero instead of being practical, then I can't guarantee his restraint. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Noah's vision tunneled. Every training session, every protocol, every rule about maintaining cover and following procedure, all of it evaporated in the face of his daughter's face on that screen. He saw himself standing, reaching across the table, doing violence that would feel righteous and solve nothing. He saw himself calling Jackson, mobilizing federal response, creating a standoff that might end with Lily in crossfire. He saw himself agreeing, compromising everything he believed in, letting Richard Vale win because the alternative was unthinkable. And then he saw something else. Something in the photograph that Richard hadn't noticed because he was too busy making threats. Something that made Noah's tactical mind shift from panic to calculation. The reflection in the minivan's window. The car that had taken the photo. Not a professional surveillance vehicle, but a civilian sedan, and in the driver's seat, barely visible, a face Noah recognized from Aurora Tower's security footage. one of the two attackers who'd been killed 20 minutes ago, according to Jackson's message. Which meant either Jackson's information was wrong or this photograph wasn't taken 40 minutes ago. It was older, staged. A piece of leverage Richard thought he had, but was actually already gone. Noah forced himself to stay calm to play the role Richard expected. "You've made your point." "Have I?" "Because you still look like you're considering doing something stupid." "I'm considering my options, which, as you've thoroughly demonstrated, are limited." Noah pulled the phone closer, studying the image like it was breaking his heart instead of revealing Richard's mistake. "If I agree to redirect my investigation, what guarantees do I have that you'll leave my daughter alone? My word, which I know means nothing to you. But also the practical reality that harming Lily gains me nothing and costs me everything. You're more useful cooperative than vengeful." "I'm not a monster, Noah. I'm a businessman. I don't make unprofitable decisions." "Staging your own death seems pretty unprofitable." "It bought me 2 years of freedom from regulatory scrutiny while I repositioned assets and prepared for this exact moment. That's not unprofitable. That's strategic." Richard stood smoothing his suit. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide. Redirect the investigation, help me reclaim Aurora, and ensure your daughter grows up safe. Or refuse and watch everything you love crumble. Choose wisely, Agent Hale. Choose like a father instead of a hero." He walked out without waiting for a response, the bell chiming his departure. Through the window, Noah watched him get back into the black sedan and drive away confident and controlled, and completely unaware he'd just made a critical mistake. Vivian was shaking. "We have to call the police. The FBI. Someone who can what arrest a dead man, protect my daughter from someone who's already compromised federal oversight." Noah pulled out his phone not to call Jackson, but to text him a coded message they'd established months ago for emergencies. 3 words that meant, "Situation critical, need secure line, assume all communications monitored." The response came back in seconds. A phone number Noah didn't recognize, and instructions to use a burner phone from a specific location. "We need to move," Noah said, standing. "Your father thinks he's won because he's always 3 steps ahead, but he just showed me something he didn't mean to show. Those 2 attackers Jackson said were killed. One of them took this photo, which means either they're not really dead, or this photo is old, or your father is working with information that's already outdated." Vivian's eyes widened. "The timestamp. You think it's fake?" "I think your father is very good at creating illusions. But illusions have holes if you know where to look." Noah headed for the door, Vivian closed behind. Margaret caught his eye from behind the counter, made a subtle gesture pointing at her ear, then at the table where they'd been sitting. The booth was bugged. Of course it was. Richard Vale didn't leave anything to chance, which meant every word they'd said, every plan they might make was already compromised. Outside, the federal agents Jackson had positioned were gone. The newspaper reader, the bookstore browser, both vanished, either pulled for another assignment or removed by someone with enough authority to override protection details. Noah's mind raced through scenarios, each darker than the last. If Webb was dirty, if the investigation was compromised from the top, if Richard had the resources to monitor everything they did, then traditional channels were useless. They needed something Richard couldn't predict, couldn't control, couldn't buy his way around. They needed the one thing Richard Vale had spent 2 years dismissing as irrelevant. They needed the janitors. "I have an idea," Noah said, pulling Vivian toward his car. "But you're going to have to trust me. And you're going to have to do something you've never done before." "What's that?" "You're going to have to see the people you've been walking past for 3 years. The cleaning staff, the maintenance workers, the security guards who work night shifts for minimum wage. You're going to have to treat them like human beings instead of furniture. Think you can do that?" Vivian's face flushed shame and determination mixing. "After last night, after watching you take down 4 men with a mop while I stood there useless, yes, I can do that. What do you need?" "I need you to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Tell them you're making a major announcement about Aurora's future. Get every corrupt executive in one room. Can you do that? Yes. But if my father finds out, he will find out. That's the point. He'll think you're capitulating, preparing to step down like he demanded. He'll come to that meeting expecting victory. What he won't expect is what happens next. Noah drove while explaining his plan, watching the rearview mirror for tails, taking random turns to shake any surveillance. Vivian listened, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding, to something that might have been hope. "That's insane," she said when he finished. "It'll never work. It worked last night when I stopped 4 armed men with cleaning supplies. Your father thinks in terms of money and power and traditional leverage. He doesn't think about the army of invisible people who keep his buildings running, who hear everything, who see everything, who've been documenting his crimes without realizing that's what they were doing." "The janitors," Vivian said slowly. "You've been recruiting them." "Not recruiting. Befriending, learning their stories, earning their trust. 6 months of night shifts taught me something your father never learned. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. It just means people aren't paying attention. And when people are not paying attention, you can build something right under their noses." He drove to an electronics store in a neighborhood Richard Vale would never think to monitor, purchased 3 burner phones with cash, and called Jackson from the parking lot. Jackson answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're somewhere safe." "Define safe. Richard Vale is alive. He's compromised, Assistant Director Webb, and he has photographs of my daughter that may or may not be current. Other than that, everything's fine." A long pause. Then, "Webb signed off on your protection detail being pulled 20 minutes ago. Said there was a credible threat elsewhere that required reassignment. I questioned it, got told to follow orders." "Noah, if Webb is dirty, then this whole investigation is exactly where I need it to be." Jackson listened carefully. "Tomorrow morning, Vivian Vale is calling an emergency board meeting. I need you to get federal marshals positioned outside Aurora Tower, but not inside. Nobody enters the building until I give the signal. Can you do that without Webb knowing?" "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to give Richard Vale exactly what he wants. A public confrontation with his daughter, a moment of triumph, a return to power. What he's going to get instead is 47 janitors with 6 months of documented evidence testimony from employees he thought were too scared to talk, and a CEO who just learned what it means to actually see the people she's been ignoring." Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard." "Good. Then Richard won't see it coming either. And Lily, I need you to personally verify her safety, not through official channels. Go to Marta's house yourself. Visually confirm she's okay. Then stay there until this is over. I trust you, Jackson. I don't trust anyone else right now. I'm leaving now. Noah. Whatever you're about to do." "I know. Make sure I come back. I will. I promised my daughter." He hung up, looked at Vivian, saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. "Last chance to walk away. Go into witness protection. Let the system handle this, save yourself. My father spent my whole life teaching me that people are disposable, that empathy is weakness, that the only thing that matters is winning." Vivian's voice was steady now, certain. "Last night I watched a janitor I'd dismissed as furniture risk his life to save mine. Not because I deserved it, not because I'd earned it, but because that's who he is. So no, Agent Hale. I'm not walking away. I'm going to finish what you started. And I'm going to make sure every person my father hurt, every worker he exploited, every janitor he rendered invisible, I'm going to make sure they're seen." Noah nodded, once started the car and drove toward tomorrow's confrontation, touching the blue bracelet on his wrist and thinking of Lily safe with Marta, of promises he'd made, of heroes who didn't have to be loud. Because sometimes revolutions didn't start with violence or power or money. Sometimes they started with invisible people who'd been watching all along, waiting for someone to finally ask them what they'd seen. Sunday night, Noah didn't sleep at all. He spent the hours between midnight and dawn making phone calls to people whose numbers he'd collected over 6 months of night shifts. Maria from the third floor, who cleaned executive offices and had 3 kids in college. Carlos, who maintained the HVAC systems and noticed everything because nobody ever looked up. Jennifer, who worked the loading docks and kept meticulous records of every delivery, every discrepancy, every moment when Aurora's official records didn't match reality. 47 janitors, maintenance workers, and night staff. 47 people who'd been invisible so long they'd become experts at seeing without being seen. By the time pale Monday morning light crept through his apartment windows, Noah had commitments from 43 of them. The other 4 were too scared, and he didn't blame them. What he was asking required courage that shouldn't be necessary just to tell the truth. At 6:47 a.m., his phone rang. Jackson. She's safe. I've been here all night, and Noah, there's no surveillance, no cars watching the house. Either Richard's bluffing or he pulled his people when you didn't immediately fold. Relief hit so hard, Noah had to sit down. Thank you. Stay with her until this is over. Don't let anyone take her anywhere, even if they have credentials, especially if they have credentials. Understood. And Noah, whatever happens today, Lily knows you love her. I made sure to tell her you're doing something important, something that matters. She said to tell you to breathe and remember your daddy job comes first. Noah touched the blue bracelet worn soft from 2 years of constant wear. Tell her I'll be home tonight. Tell her we're having pizza even though it's Monday. Tell her... His voice cracked. Tell her I love her infinity. Infinity plus 1. She already told me the script. Jackson's voice gentled. Come back, Noah. That little girl has already lost enough. The line went dead. Noah stood in his empty apartment surrounded by the simple geometry of a life built on love and loss, and promises he'd somehow managed to keep. Then he put on his janitor's uniform one last time, checked his weapon, and drove to Aurora Tower. The lobby was already buzzing when he arrived at 8:15 a.m. Board members in expensive suits, assistants, carrying tablets, and coffee security guards positioned at every entrance. Vivian had done her job. The emergency meeting was on, and everyone who mattered was coming, including Noah, suspected a dead man who was very much alive. He entered through the service entrance like he had for 6 months, nodded to the security guard who barely glanced at him, and took the freight elevator to the basement level, where the real work of Aurora Tower happened. The break room was crowded, more crowded than he'd ever seen it at this hour. Maria saw him first. She was 63 years old, had worked at Aurora for 27 years, and had raised 4 kids on a janitor's salary because her husband died young and life didn't give her better options. She stood when Noah entered, and 42 other people stood with her. "We're here," she said simply. "Like you asked. But Noah, if this goes wrong..." "If it goes wrong, I take full responsibility. You were following supervisor instructions. That's all anyone needs to know. But it won't go wrong, because for the first time in this building's history, people are going to see you, really see you, and once they do, everything changes." Carlos stepped forward, a thick folder in his hands. Maintenance records going back 5 years. Every safety violation that was reported and ignored. Every repair that was deferred to save money. Every corner that was cut because Aurora's executives decided profit mattered more than people's lives. Jennifer added her own stack of documents. Shipping manifests that don't match purchase orders. Deliveries of equipment that never made it to inventory. Waste disposal that violated every environmental regulation but was covered up with falsified reports. It's all here. One by one, 43 people presented the evidence of their invisible observations. Security camera footage that showed executives conducting deals they'd later deny. Email printouts from office computers that cleaning staff weren't supposed to notice but couldn't help seeing. Photographs of documents left carelessly on desks at night when the only people around were the ones nobody looked at. 6 months of Noah asking questions and building trust had created an archive of truth that no amount of Richard Vale's money or influence could erase. "The meeting starts at 9, Noah said, checking his watch. "Vivian will be presenting her vision for Aurora's future." About 15 minutes in, Richard Vale is going to make his dramatic entrance. When he does, I need you all in position. You're not hiding anymore. You're not invisible. You're witnesses. And when I give the signal, you're going to show this board exactly what their company looks like from the perspective of people they've been walking past for years. A younger woman in the back, Sarah, who'd started working nights 6 months ago to pay for her mother's cancer treatment, raised her hand tentatively. What if they don't listen? What if they just see us as janitors trying to cause trouble? Then we make them listen. Vivian's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in a simple black suit, her hair pulled back, no jewelry, except a small pin on her lapel, the Aurora Tower employee badge she'd never worn before. Because I'm not just presenting a vision today, I'm presenting the truth. And the truth is that this company has been built on your backs while pretending you don't exist. That ends now. The room went silent. These were people who'd cleaned Vivian's office, who'd seen her dismiss them or ignore them or treat them like equipment for 3 years. The skepticism was thick enough to touch. Maria spoke up, her voice careful. Ms. Vale, with respect, we've heard promises before. Every new executive says they care about workers. Then quarterly earnings come in and suddenly we're operational expenses that need cutting. I know. And I've been one of those executives. Vivian stepped fully into the room, and Noah saw the effort it cost her to meet 43 pairs of eyes that had every reason to distrust her. 6 months ago, if someone had asked me to describe Aurora Corporation, I would have talked about market share and innovation and competitive advantages. I wouldn't have mentioned any of you. Not because you weren't important, but because I'd been trained not to see you. My father taught me that empathy was weakness, that people were resources to be managed, not individuals to be valued. And I believed him because it was easier than questioning everything I'd built my life around. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. The photograph Noah had drawn in his initial investigation report, an organizational chart showing Aurora's structure. But Vivian had modified it. At the bottom, where Noah had labeled operational staff, she'd added names, faces, individual human beings who made the building function. This is what Aurora actually looks like, she said quietly. Not the version in investor presentations. The real version. And if we're going to fix it, if we're going to be a company worth saving, it starts with acknowledging that you've been here all along, watching, working, waiting for someone to finally ask what you saw. Carlos crossed his arms, still skeptical, but listening. So, what happens after today? Say your father shows up like Agent Hale thinks. Say we present all this evidence and somehow the board actually cares. What changes? Because we've been promised change before, and it never comes. What changes is me. Not just what I say, but what I do, what I prioritize, who I listen to. Vivian's voice was steady, certain. My first act as CEO, if I'm still CEO after today, is establishing an employee oversight committee with real power. Not a suggestion box that gets ignored. Real authority to review decisions, challenge policies, and hold executives accountable. And half the committee seats go to hourly workers. People like you, because you see things we miss, you know things we ignore, and this company needs that knowledge more than it needs another executive with an MBA and no connection to how the actual work gets done. Maria studied Vivian for a long moment. Then she looked at Noah, who nodded slightly. The decision was theirs to make. All right, Maria said finally. We'll stand with you. But Ms. Vale, if this is a performance, if you're just using us to win some power struggle with your father, and then everything goes back to normal, we'll know. And we'll remember. And there are 43 of us who clean your offices, who maintain your systems, who have access to every corner of this building. You don't want us as enemies. No, Vivian agreed. I don't. Which is why I'm asking you to be partners instead. At 8:47 a.m., they moved into position. Noah coordinated placement through text messages and hand signals, positioning people at strategic points throughout the building. The boardroom was on the 20th floor, accessible by 3 elevators and 2 stairwells. Noah stationed people at each access point, hidden but ready. The board members arrived in clusters, talking among themselves, checking phones, radiating the particular self-importance of people who believed they controlled things. Gerald Webb, CFO, and brother to the compromised assistant director, was there looking nervous. 3 senators who'd taken Aurora money showed up despite this being technically a private corporate matter. The investors, the executives, the lawyers. All the people who'd benefited from Richard Vail's original corruption and Vivian's subsequent cover-up. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Vivian called the meeting to order. Noah watched from the service corridor, the door cracked just enough to see and hear. He wore his janitor's uniform and carried his mop-like armor. The blue bracelet on his wrist caught the fluorescent light. "Thank you all for coming on short notice." Vivian began, standing at the head of the table with the kind of controlled composure Noah recognized from 6 months of observation. "I've called this meeting to discuss Aurora Corporation's future, specifically my role in that future." Gerald Webb leaned forward. "Vivian, if this is about the federal investigation, our lawyers have advised. This isn't about the federal investigation. This is about something more fundamental. This is about who we are as a company and who we're going to be." Vivian pulled up a presentation, and Noah recognized the slides he'd helped her prepare last night. "For 3 years, I've run Aurora according to principles my father taught me. Profit above all else, efficiency over ethics, results regardless of cost. Those principles built an empire. They also built a company that's currently under federal investigation for fraud, safety violations, and systematic exploitation of vulnerable workers. That investigation is based on flawed," one of the senators started. "That investigation is based on 6 months of meticulous documentation by a federal agent who worked in this building as a janitor, who saw everything we thought was hidden, who documented everything we thought was protected." Vivian's voice was steel. "And before any of you try to dismiss his findings or discredit his methods, you should know he's not alone. He's never been alone." Noah's phone buzzed. Jackson's text: "Federal marshals in position outside. Building is surrounded. No one gets in or out without authorization." Webb tried to pull them. I went over his head to the director. "You've got full support." At 9:14 a.m., the main elevator chimed. The doors opened, and Richard Vail stepped out like he owned the building, which technically he had for 43 years before staging his own death. The boardroom went silent. Several people stood. One senator actually gasped. Gerald Webb's face went white. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard said warmly, walking into the room like he'd never left. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. Reports of my death were, as they say, greatly exaggerated. I'm here to discuss Aurora's leadership transition and my return to the position I never should have left." Vivian didn't move. "You're not welcome here." "Sweetheart, I built this company. I'm always welcome." Richard took the seat at the head of the table, forcing Vivian to either fight for it or step aside. She stepped aside, and Noah saw the strategy: let him think he's winning. "Now I know this is shocking, but I assure you, everything was done legally. My death was a medical error, a misdiagnosis that I've spent 2 years correcting. During that time, I've watched my daughter run Aurora with admirable dedication but fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a corporation successful. That ends today." "Does it?" Vivian's voice was calm. "Because I don't think you understand what's actually happening here." "I understand perfectly. You're going to step down gracefully, citing personal reasons, or family obligations, or whatever story we agree on. I'm going to resume leadership. The board is going to welcome me back because they remember what Aurora was like when I ran it: profitable, powerful, and unburdened by sentimental notions about worker welfare." Noah gave the signal. A simple text: "Now." The doors opened. All of them. Every entrance to the boardroom, every service door, every corridor that the board members had never noticed, because they led to places where janitors and maintenance workers existed. 43 people walked in carrying folders and tablets and evidence. They filled the room's perimeter, standing quiet and dignified, making themselves visible for the first time in their careers. Richard's expression flickered confusion, irritation, then dismissal. "Security, please remove these unauthorized persons from—" "They're not unauthorized," Vivian interrupted. "They're employees. They work here. They've worked here for years while you and I walked past them like they were furniture. And today, they're going to tell you what Aurora Corporation actually looks like from the perspective of people who keep it running." Maria stepped forward, first opening her folder. "My name is Maria Santos. I've cleaned executive offices at Aurora for 27 years. In that time, I've seen 7 CEOs, 12 restructurings, and countless promises about improving worker conditions. I've also seen this." She pulled out a photograph. Executives celebrating record profits with champagne that cost more than her monthly salary, while her own pay had been frozen for 6 years. Carlos was next. "Carlos Mendez, HVAC Maintenance. I repair the systems that keep this building at 72 degrees year-round. I also reported 17 critical safety violations in the past 2 years. Every single report was filed as resolved, without any actual repairs being done. The documentation is all here, including my supervisor's emails instructing me to falsify inspection records." One by one, they presented evidence, not as victims seeking sympathy, but as professionals providing data. The board members' expressions shifted from irritation to discomfort to dawning horror as the scope of Aurora's systemic corruption became undeniable. Richard tried to regain control. "This is a coup orchestrated by a federal agent who infiltrated our company under false pretenses. None of this evidence is admissible in any legitimate federal agent." Noah stepped into the room, still wearing his uniform, still carrying his mop. "You mean the janitor you ignored for 6 months? The one who documented everything because nobody bothered to notice what he was doing? That federal agent?" Richard's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. "Noah Hale, I should have known you'd try something dramatic. Where's your backup? Where's the cavalry you think is coming to save the day?" "They're already here. 43 people you never bothered to see. Federal marshals surrounding the building. And evidence that doesn't need a courtroom to be devastating, it just needs an audience willing to look." Noah set down his mop, pulled out his badge, and set it on the table. "I'm done being invisible. We all are." Jennifer from the loading dock spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. "I have shipping records proving Aurora has been illegally dumping chemical waste for 5 years. I reported it to 3 different supervisors. Each time I was told to keep quiet or lose my job. I'm a single mother with 2 kids. I couldn't afford to lose my job. But I kept records anyway, because someone needed to remember when the company decided to forget." A board member Noah didn't recognize stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. Richard, you assured us that all Aurora's operations were compliant with—" "I assured you that profits would continue growing, which they did. How they grew shouldn't concern you unless it affects your stock price." Richard's mask was slipping, revealing the ruthless calculation underneath. "These people are janitors and maintenance workers. Their testimony is worthless against our legal team." "Is it?" Vivian pulled up another slide. "Because I've spent the last 24 hours doing something you never taught me to do, listening. And what I've learned is that this company has been systematically violating labor laws, environmental regulations, and safety standards for decades. The federal investigation Agent Hale was conducting. It's not going away." Assistant Director Webb tried to shut it down, but Jackson Chen went over his head. "The director of the FBI is personally reviewing this case now, so the question isn't whether Aurora is guilty. The question is what we do about it." Richard stood, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "What we do is remember who built this company, who made it powerful, who created the wealth that everyone in this room has benefited from. You want to destroy that legacy because some janitors are upset about working conditions. Fine. But don't pretend this is about justice. This is about weakness. This is about choosing to care about people who don't matter in the grand scheme of stop. The word came from Maria, soft but absolute. Just stop. You keep saying we don't matter. You keep calling us janitors like it's an insult. Like cleaning offices and maintaining buildings and keeping your company functional is somehow beneath your notice. But Mr. Vale, who do you think really runs Aurora? Who fixes your systems when they break? Who cleans up your messes? Who sees everything you think is hidden? We're not invisible because we don't matter. We're invisible because you choose not to look. The room was silent. Several board members wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Noah's phone buzzed. Jackson again, director, authorized full federal intervention. Marshals are entering now. Webb is being detained for questioning. Whatever you did, it worked. Lily is asking when you're coming home. The boardroom doors opened, and federal marshals in tactical gear entered, moving with practiced efficiency. They weren't there to arrest anyone yet. That would come later with lawyers and hearings and proper procedure. But their presence made the situation undeniable. This wasn't a corporate power struggle anymore. This was a federal case. Richard Vale looked around the room at the board members distancing themselves, at the janitors standing firm, at his daughter meeting his eyes with something that might have been pity or might have been grief. His empire was crumbling, and for the first time in his life, he had no backup plan. "You can't win this," he said to Vivian, his voice hollow. "Even if you destroy me, Aurora is still built on my foundation. Everything you have comes from decisions I made." "I know," Vivian said quietly. "And I'm going to spend years fixing the damage those decisions caused. I'm going to make Aurora into something neither of us ever imagined, a company that actually values the people who make it work. It won't be as profitable. It won't be as powerful. But it will be something I can be proud of. Something that doesn't require ignoring human beings to succeed. You'll fail. Maybe. But I'd rather fail trying to do the right thing than succeed by doing what you did." She turned to the board. "I'm resigning as CEO effective immediately. Not because my father demanded it, but because Aurora needs leadership that isn't connected to this corruption. I'm recommending a complete restructuring, starting with an independent audit and ending with a new executive team chosen by a committee that includes employee representatives. If you want to keep me on in any capacity, I'll serve as an advisor. But I'm done making decisions that hurt people." Richard laughed, bitter and broken. "You think giving up power makes you noble? It makes you a fool. These people—" He gestured at the janitors. "They'll forget this moment the second their next paycheck clears. They'll go back to being invisible. And you'll go back to being irrelevant. Then I'll be a fool." Vivian looked at Noah, at the 43 people who'd risked everything to tell the truth, at the blue bracelet on Noah's wrist that represented something her father would never understand. "But at least I'll be a fool who learned to see." The federal marshals moved toward Richard. He didn't resist. As they escorted him out, he looked at Noah one last time. "Your daughter is safe. Has always been safe. Because the photograph you showed me yesterday, the one you thought was taken 40 minutes before our meeting, it was 3 days old. The attacker who took it is actually dead now, which means your leverage was a bluff. A good one, but still a bluff. You made one critical mistake, Mr. Vale. You thought threatening my daughter would make me fold. Instead, it made me dangerous." Richard was led away, and the boardroom slowly emptied. Board members quietly resigned or promised cooperation. Senators slipped out side doors. Gerald Webb was already being questioned by federal agents about his brother's role in the cover-up. By noon, Aurora Tower was effectively under federal oversight, and Vivian was working with investigators to untangle 43 years of systematic corruption. Noah found her in her office at 2 p.m., staring out at the city she'd ruled from this glass tower. "Thank you," she said without turning around. "For what?" "For seeing me. Even when I didn't deserve it. Even when I was cruel. Even when I was exactly like my father." She turned, and her eyes were red but dry. You could have let those men take me on Friday night. Could have finished your investigation without involving me. Could have let me go down with my father. But you didn't. Why? Noah thought of Lily's question from days ago. Why help people who are mean? He thought of Sarah's voice in his memory telling him he ran toward fires. He thought of 43 janitors who'd spent years being invisible because people like Vivian had chosen not to see them. Because, he said simply, my daughter asks me every night if I helped anyone today. And I don't lie to her. Vivian nodded, understanding something she couldn't quite put into words. What happens now? Now you rebuild. It'll take years. It'll be hard. There will be days you'll want to give up or go back to the way things were because it's easier. But if you're serious about this, about actually valuing the people who make Aurora work, then you start by keeping the promises you made in that boardroom. The Employee Oversight Committee. That and a dozen other things. Fair wages, real safety protocols, transparency, accountability. All the things corporations say they believe in, but rarely practice. Noah headed for the door. I'm going home to my daughter now. I have a pizza to pick up and a promise to keep about daddy jobs being more important than hero jobs. Noah? Vivian's voice stopped him. If I do this, if I actually transform Aurora into something better, will you consider coming back? Not as a janitor, not as an investigator, but as someone who helps me make sure we're doing it right. He looked back at her. This woman who'd called him furniture and was now asking him to help rebuild her empire. Ask me again in 6 months, after I've watched you keep your promises. After the janitors tell me you've actually changed. After I know this isn't just guilt, or fear, or a temporary crisis of conscience. Ask me then. I will. Noah left Aurora Tower through the front entrance this time, not the service corridor. Walked past the marble floors he'd mopped for 6 months, and out into October sunshine that felt like freedom. Jackson was waiting outside with Lily, who launched herself at Noah the moment she saw him. Daddy, Uncle Jackson said you were a hero again. He said you helped lots of people and everyone is safe now. Noah knelt to her level, holding her tight breathing and strawberry shampoo and safety and everything that mattered. I helped. But I had help too. Lots of help from people who've been helping all along. Are you done with the dangerous job now? Yeah, Ladybug, I'm done. Good, because it's Monday and you promised pizza even though pizza is usually Friday, and I've been thinking about it all day. She touched his bracelet, then her own, the matching blue that connected them. Did you breathe? Every time I needed to. And you came home. I always come home to you. 6 months later, Aurora Tower unveiled a new installation in the lobby. Where once there had been corporate art that cost millions and meant nothing, there now hung a simple crayon drawing behind museum-quality glass. A stick figure, with a blue bracelet holding a mop standing between smaller figures and shadowy threats. In the corner, in a child's careful printing, My Daddy the Hero, by Lily Hale, age 7. Below it, a brass plaque read, Sometimes heroes hide in plain sight. This memorial honors all employees past and present whose invisible labor made Aurora Tower function. May we never again mistake invisibility for insignificance. Noah brought Lily to see it on the day of the dedication. She stood in front of her drawing, now elevated to public art, and smiled. Everyone can see it now, she said, satisfied. Everyone knows janitors can be heroes. Everyone knows you're an incredible artist, Noah corrected. And that your dad is very lucky to be your dad. Vivian approached wearing jeans and a simple sweater. Her CEO wardrobe mostly retired in favor of clothes that didn't create distance between her and everyone else. Lily, thank you for letting us display your artwork. It's the most important piece in this building. You're welcome. My dad says you're making Aurora better now. Is that true? I'm trying. It's hard. But I have help from people like Maria and Carlos and Jennifer. They're teaching me things my father never did. Good, Lily said seriously. Because my dad says you have to see people to help people, and helping is the most important job. Noah's phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Rodriguez. Lily's latest drawings show her father sitting with her, not standing between her and danger. She's healing. So are you. Proud of you both. They had pizza that night, a Tuesday, not a Friday, because traditions were meant to be enjoyed, not just maintained. Lily talked about her day, her friends, her upcoming birthday party, where she wanted everyone to dress as community helpers because someone told me at school that janitors aren't real heroes, and I want to prove them wrong. After she fell asleep, Noah sat by her bed, watching her breathe, thinking about the 6 months that had changed everything. Richard Vale was awaiting trial on 17 federal charges. Assistant Director Webb had resigned in disgrace. 3 senators had lost their seats. And Aurora Corporation was undergoing the slowest, hardest transformation of its existence from an empire built on exploitation to a company trying to remember that profit and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems, still resistance, still days when the old guard tried to reclaim what they'd lost. But there were also 43 janitors who now sat on oversight committees, who had voices in decisions that affected their lives, who were finally truly visible. Noah touched the blue bracelet Lily had made, the one that reminded him to breathe. He thought about Sarah, who would have been proud of him for choosing their daughter over heroics, for learning that the bravest thing wasn't always running toward danger. Sometimes the bravest thing was running home. "Love you, Infinity Ladybug," he whispered. In her sleep, Lily smiled and murmured, "Infinity +1, Daddy. Infinity +1." And in a glass tower downtown, under the gentle glow of museum lights, a crayon drawing hung as a monument to a simple truth that should never have needed stating. Heroes don't need capes or badges or power. They just need to see people who others have chosen to ignore and refuse to look away. Sometimes heroes hide in plain sight, armed with nothing but mops and courage and blue bracelets that whisper, "Breathe." Sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes that's everything.